Nice.
Yeah.
So, Karen, tell us why being happy, healthy, and vital is so important to you personally.
Yeah, because I've felt the other side of it. You know, I've been in that space. I've experienced the childhood trauma. I've experienced a life that I thought was happy. You know, I was stuck in the job that I thought I couldn't get out of, that really just sucked the life out of me. I've experienced misery and pain and everything, you know, and I worked really hard at pulling myself out of it. And the techniques and the things that I applied, such as nature and spirituality and positive psychology, to me, it's really important that I help other people understand the power of these things, and that you don't have to accept what you've been given, that you can create anything that you want and that you choose if you allow these things to impact you. And so why it's important to me, is I've already just touched on it as well, is because I have seen the power of what we can co-create when we're all operating from a place where we are happy, when we are in flow, when we are connected to ourselves and connected to a higher power, if that's the way you want to think. I've seen the impact that we can have, and I feel a difference. So that's why living a happy and healthy and vitalized life is so important to me, because I know what it feels like to be on the other side.
Great. And as many of us do, and some of us are still in that place, and to be able to find that other side is really important. So let's talk about that. So let's talk about the impact that nature has on our mood, our well-being, our cognitive function, and our physical body.
How long have you got? I've had to make a list. I mean, it's impossible to memorize. Well, it's not impossible to memorize, but I really want to get the importance of this across, which is why I would like to list some of the most critical things, right? So the way that it impacts us on a physical level. So when we are in nature, when we allow our senses to absorb nature, it helps to stimulate our parasympathetic nervous system. And that's responsible for our rest and digest state, when we're at ease. It decreases cortisol, which is obviously the stress-related hormone. It decreases our blood pressure. It decreases our heart rate. It decreases all of our cardiac associated processes. It also increases our natural killer immune cells. It increases our ability to heal naturally. It increases the amount of serotonin, which is a happy hormone that we have flowing around our brain. And it also reverses things like atopic skin diseases and reactions. It reverses nearsightedness or I always say mytopia, I'm thinking of utopia. Nearsightedness, let's just call it that. And it also helps us to reduce asthma as well. So those are the physical things. Now, when it comes to our mood and our well-being and our cognitive functions, everything to do with our mind. So cognitive functions, it increases creativity. It increases our connection to intuition, our memory, our spatial recognition. We have an improved ability to solve problems. We have increased optimism, and optimism is vital if we are to employ and keep healthy behaviors, and if we're able to see our way out of things. It also helps us to stick to goals. It helps us to plan. It helps us to multitask, maintain focus and attention. And attention is a currency right now, right? And it actually also helps us to reduce the effects of aging on certain cognitive functions as well, like memory. When we're in nature, we gain a sense of hope, relaxation. We become more empathetic and more compassionate. We increase feelings of vitality and self-esteem, equanimity, pleasure, optimism, happiness. And this obviously then we can go a step further, and it takes us to that space of we actually can turn into or become in a sense of awe and connection to something that is bigger and brighter than us. Anyone want to go outside?
Yes. After you've watched this, okay? Not before.
Yeah.
Finish watching Carrie, then we're all going outside. Is there any science behind this positive impact?
Oh, there's too much. There's so much science behind this. And you know, when I was thinking about, okay, what do I really want to say? I don't want to spout out like all of the scientific research, right? What I want to do is I want to empower people to understand the impact and the effects that nature has on us, so that people can then make their own decision about how they implement nature or bring nature into their everyday existence. So I want to look at a couple of things. When we go into nature, it's the only place that we actually employ all 5 senses. So the reason we feel so alive when we're in nature is because we're employing all of the senses. So I thought we'd start there. So we'd look at, well, how does smell impact us? How does the seeing nature impact us? How does hearing nature impact us? Because then what that's going to do is that's going to drive that desire and that motivation to get out into nature. And the reason why we don't spend so much time in nature right now is because we have what social psychologists call a forecasting error. We actually underestimate what things will make us feel good and what things will make us feel bad. It's an error. And because we are so disconnected from nature of late, we completely underestimate how nature is going to impact us. In 2008, we actually tipped over a threshold. More people were living in urban environments than people were living in natural environments.
Wow, that's an interesting stat.
Yeah. So we've got what's called nature deficit order, where it's literally is we're not getting enough natural time. I say we, obviously it's a collective we, right? But every individual is different. But we're removed from nature, and it's leading to psychological issues, mental issues, and physiological issues. You know, when we remain separated from nature, we suffer from things like obesity, loneliness. We become more irritable and angry and aggressive. We're more easily distracted. We suffer from stress and anxiety a lot more. We're more depressed. We're more prone to violence and crime. We have vitamin D deficiency. Like, the list goes on as well. Like, when you take yourself away from nature, and obviously there's the whole social media thing, right? And then the more time we spend on social media, then we actually impair our ability to notice what's going on around us and stay focused and give attention to things. And those living in grey spaces, they are more prone to, as I said, aggression and violence, and they have less optimism and they have less coping strategies for the day-to-day stuff that happens in life. So it's absolutely vital that we make space for nature. So let's first of all have a look at smell. So as I said, when we go into nature, we engage all of our senses. So how can smell impact us? So if I say to you, Karen, when you go into nature, what are the smells that come to mind?
Oh, pine trees, actually. The smell of the freshly cut grass, or the pine tree smell. Yeah. I mean, it's one of the most commonly known ones, right? And there's a reason for that. And Japan and Korea are the leaders in forest bathing, and all of the research that have come out of those two countries around the impact of the coniferous trees that they have on our creativity and on our physiology as well. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But first of all, let's have a look. So we developed the sense of smell because smell has a direct connection to the brain, right? And then as we smell, it stimulates the amygdala in the brain, and it's the amygdala that will put us on standby for fight or flight. So if we smell something dangerous, if we smell something off, then we are out of there, right? And smell is very important because it has that immediate and direct connection to the brain. This is why when you smell a perfume of someone from years ago, you suddenly have memories, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, that's right. And the thing about the forest bathing with the pine trees or the coniferous trees is all about what they call phytocytes, or phytocytes, sorry, should I say. And these are the substances that the trees give off. And the phytocytes, they are actually responsible for creating a psychological shift in our brains. So when we smell these, and there was a study done, they had people in hotel rooms, right? And they actually sprayed cypress oil into some of the hotel rooms, and they sprayed nothing into the control hotel rooms. And the people that were sprayed with the cypress oil from the hinoko tree, they actually were they increased the amount of natural killer cells that they had. So they improved their immune system by up to 20%.
Wow.
Yes, they improved the number of natural killer cells that they had. And the natural killer cells are the cells that fight cancer. They also increased the amount of cancer-fighting proteins in their body, as well as reported less fatigue. There have been so many studies done. People, when they actually engage in forest bathing or just basically walking with trees so that you can sniff all this stuff in, right? It lowers your heart rate. It lowers your cholesterol. It lowers the cortisol that's floating around. It makes you more creative. I think there was a study done with a bunch of students where those students that they spent 2 days hiking, that's it. So there was a bunch of students that didn't do hiking, a bunch of students that did do hiking for 2 days. And after 2 days, they were actually able to be more creative within a test of up to 50%. So the effects of being in nature, the effects of walking with the trees makes you more creative. And a lot of the effects of the phytocytes is actually been reported to be more effective than pharmaceuticals, which is huge. So if you want to take away from this, buy some cypress oil, some essential oil, and stick it on your... I literally do that when I'm working. No, literally when I'm working, I'm either burning cypress oil in an oil burner, or I stick it on my wrists, you know, because if I want to be more creative or I need to be productive or something like that, then that's what I do. I literally sniff cypress oil or from the hinoko tree. Yeah, so if you want to reduce stress, if you want to become more creative, if you want to boost your immune system, then use smell. And there are so many smells like lavender and rose oil and everything. They all have their impact, right?
Yeah,
so understand.
I have to tell you, I've got peppermint oil right now, which is good for clear thinking. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we can go on to ears. So how does hearing nature impact us? So we very quickly process sound because, again, it alerts us to dangers that are around us. This is the evolutionary aspect to hearing, right? And when we hear sounds, obviously it's collected by the eardrum, it's taken into the brain, and it stimulates part of the brain that actually processes fear. It tells us whether to become aroused, or it tells us whether to move. It's responsible for motion, so we know whether to get out of there. And through, again, lots of studies, they actually found that when there's lots of what we class as unpleasant noises, it creates a lot of micro stresses in us. So lots of little stresses. And when you have a collection of micro stresses, it actually adds up to a big stress. And to the point where it's actually, I remember there was one study where they assessed the reading ability of children, those that lived in more rural areas versus those that lived nearer to an airport. Do you know this study? You're nodding.
No, I'm just fascinated. I think I know what you're going to say.
Yes, and as the decibels increased, it actually impaired the child's reading development by months. So as the decibels increased, it reduced their development by months. Because of...
No, I was just saying, this makes sense because I know that when I'm home by myself and it's really quiet and I can create and do things, but then people come home and there's noise and it's like you can't concentrate anymore. You can't think.
No, that's right. Yeah, I mean, there's the attention aspect, you know, but it's the micro stresses that are being caused that's causing the increase in blood pressure, that's causing the cognitive functions to fail. And it says here that noise increases blood pressure and it increases your cardiac function. So when there's unpleasant noises around, and this is obviously going to impact all of the cognitive functions that we have. So then what is it that we like? Well, I'll tell you first of all what it is that we don't like, and it's traffic noise that is the most disruptive to us, particularly motorbikes. Wow. Which is not good from where I am right now in Chiang Mai.
No, everywhere.
No, and it's interesting because I have physically and mentally felt the impact of going from a tropical island to a city. I'm feeling the effects of all of this, like literally in my body and in my mind. But the sounds that we like the most, can you have a guess?
Bird sounds.
You're spot on. Yeah. So the sounds that we like the most are birds, water, and wind.
Oh, wind.
So
I wouldn't have picked wind, but I would have picked water. Yeah.
Yeah. And the reason for this is because we associate, when we hear the sound, when we hear water, when we hear wind, when we hear birds, we associate this with safety and security. Did you think about it? When we hear bird sound, when we hear bird song, it means that the area is free from predators. It means that the area is free from threats. So again, this is an evolved reaction, right? Yeah. So our brains like to hear bird song. When there's no bird song, that's when you need to worry. And when we hear bird song,
so much sense. Yeah.
When you hear bird song, when you hear water, when you hear the rustling of leaves and wind, that's when we feel most relaxed. That's when we know we are safe, and that's when the blood pressure can go down. That's when all of the cardiac responses can go down. And that's when we feel at ease. So that's what our brain likes to hear. And it improves our mood and it improves our mental alertness. So again, a little takeaway that you can take from this. And again, studies have shown that if you are in a stressful situation, listen to nature, listen to birdsong for 5 minutes, and it will automatically reduce your blood pressure and reduce your stress reaction. Some people even go to the point where they say that you can use noise cancelling earphones. Obviously, it depends on what environment you're in, because you actually want to hear your environment, right? You don't want to cancel it all out. But if you have no natural sounds around you, you can put earphones on to cancel that out if it's necessary. I actually listened to an app. It's called Noisily, N-O-S-I-L-I. And what this app does is it produces a mixture of different natural sounds. So it has trees, it has wind, it has thunder and lightning and rivers and seas and waves and birds, all of these natural sounds. And you can select what sounds you want. So it creates this cacophony, the word, or symphony of all of these sounds. And then I listen to that when I'm working to make me more creative, to improve my memory, to improve my ability to problem solve, to improve my ability to see solutions.
That makes sense. My husband and I, one of the things we absolutely love doing is doing a float pod. Have you ever been floating?
I've never been floating, but I know exactly what you're talking about. I mean, I float in the sea.
So we float in these little capsules and you have music playing, and we've tried all the different types of music, and it has orchestral music in the background, and we haven't enjoyed that. And it's like, but the one we've just found that makes us both so relaxed is just the bird song and the nature sounds, without any percussion or instruments or orchestra behind it, just the natural sounds.
But it's interesting you say that, because birdsong has actually been proven to give the same physiological reactions as good and nice music, but birdsong is the natural one, right? And it obviously, that what music you find relaxing is going to be very subjective. So if they don't have something that is suitable for you, then you're not going to react that way. But birdsong is universal. It's been proven to be universal, and that's why, because our brains associate this to safety and security. So all of the physiological stuff can relax, and because we're not stressed, because we're not on edge, then all of our cognitive functions can work better. And then the other one I want to talk about is visual, and then I'm going to talk about prana, because I cannot go off today without talking about prana. So the visual one, so why is this so important? So everyone chooses to go the scenic route, right? Everyone prefers to go the scenic route rather than the motorway. Why is this? Any idea, Karen?
It's more beautiful.
It is more beautiful, but why do you associate it to be more beautiful?
Tell me.
Fractals.
Oh.
Have you ever heard of a fractal?
Tell me more.
So fractals, we see fractals everywhere, right? Fractals are, in its simplest form, fractals are a simplified or simplistic mathematical rule. So when we see a simple shape, but repeated many, 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 many times, that is a fractal. And fractals, you put lots of these shapes together and it creates the illusion of chaos. Or if you see something that looks chaotic, if you actually pay attention to it, you can see that all it is a collection of very simplified shapes. So that's what a fractal is. And we have lots and lots and lots of examples of fractals in nature. One of the most obvious is you see a tree trunk, that then goes off into the branches, that then goes off into the twigs, that then goes off into the leaves, the veins of the leaves, right? But it's all the same shapes, just branching off, getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. So that is a fractal. And we're surrounded by these in nature. The most common places, or where the most congregated collection of fractals are, is obviously trees, waves, coastlines, and clouds. And we gravitate towards these fractals. We don't have to stare at fractals. We just need to be in the presence of fractals. And our eyes pick this up. You're looking around now, aren't you? Oh, you're wafting the fly, looking for fractals.
No, there was a fly. I was like, come away, fly.
That's interesting. I thought you were like looking for fractals because you've got some behind you in your plants.
But Carrie, I'm wondering then, is this similar to this idea that most things man-made have just straight lines? And so, you know, the motorway, it's all straight lines, which maybe aren't the same as the fractal. Am I on the right track or not?
No, you're totally on the right track, yes. And our eyes actually have a preference. There's certain spatial things that we prefer. So we don't like flat edges. We don't like sharp edges. Our eyes don't like these. Oh, I just hit my head on the ball. It actually makes us recoil, right? Like that. It's very dangerous to look at edges. What we actually prefer is curves to a certain degree, and we actually prefer things to be spaced out nice and equally, which in nature naturally occurs, right? But it doesn't occur so much in man-made things. But you do find fractals in many man-made things, even art. You know, I draw mandalas, so these are also fractals. I just happen to have a mandala book here. You know, these are also, you know, the repeated shapes. So why does this work? How does this work? So basically, our eyes, our retinas, when we scan for things so that we're able to see whether it's a threat or not, when we're looking to name something, our retinas actually move in the shape of fractals. So we scan the large first, then we scan smaller, then we scan smaller. So when there are natural fractals occurring, our eyes feel much more comfortable around these shapes because it's how our eyes move. We can naturally scan nature. When it's something that's not in a fractal manner, something that's man-made, our eyes find it very difficult to scan this and look to see what it is. And it takes a lot more effort, it takes a lot more energy for us to do that. So we feel more comfortable and we feel more relaxed and at ease when there are fractals around. And I'll give you a very simple example, capital letters versus smaller letters. When something is written in all capital letters, it's very difficult to read, right? Because our retinas don't scan in that way.
We call them shouty capitals. It feels like it's harsh.
Yes, because it is harsh on the eyes and it takes more energy to associate what they are or to name what they are. And that's why we can't read very fast when it's all in capitals, because our eyes don't scan so quickly. There's no recognition there. So when we are surrounded by fractals, we actually stimulate parts of the brain that allow us to heal a lot quicker as well. So I'm sure you've heard of, people who are next to windows in hospitals, people who have the ability to go outside during the healing process. They will heal so much quicker than those people that do not have access to these fractals, that do not have access to the natural sounds, etc. But really just the view of the fractals is enough. Enough to the point where even if you can't get outside, if you bring plants inside, if you bring a natural picture inside, if you've got nature on your screensaver, that is enough to reduce blood pressure. It's enough to reduce stress reactions. It's enough. It actually brings you back. There's science that's proven that when stressed out, 5 minutes of looking at a natural picture or a natural scene or watching, I don't know, the waves roll in, 5 minutes alone is enough to bring us back to our natural state. Wow. Whereas when you're looking at a non-natural scene, 10 minutes and you've still not changed, your stress reactions have not come down. And I'm sure you've heard of walk and talks.
Love those.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, so we talked about the impact of the smell, but the impact of the sight too. When we are surrounded by what's natural, what our eyes are more comfortable with, our brains become more relaxed, and therefore we're more creative. and we become more energized. And we'll talk about energy in a second. And when we are surrounded by fractals, it actually helps us to generate what we call alpha waves in the brain. And when we're in that alpha wave state, we feel more relaxed, we become more meditative, and therefore our cognitive functions can work a lot more effectively because our brains become flooded with serotonin and dopamine. And when our brains are flooded with serotonin and dopamine, we are able to create more neural connections in the brain. And the connections that we do have, they grow bigger, which allows more electrical impulses to flow through. So we're able to think quicker, we're able to problem solve more, we're able to see more options, see more possibilities. The list goes on.
I'm like thinking, I need to get out more.
And it also, it lulls us into this sense of awe as well, that there is something greater and there is something bigger than me. And I want to talk about the role of prana very quickly. Prana, chi, ki, energy, whatever you want to call it. Prana or energy comes into our atmosphere and it's attached to an oxygen molecule. Now, what give off oxygen molecules?
Trees
and plants, and also moving bodies of water, so the oceans and rivers. You also get a lot of oxygen and prana, rich oxygen around the trees and around the plants. So you have prana, which is energy, life force attached to this oxygen. When we breathe in through the nose, this oxygen and prana are attached. So we have an organ that sits here called the olfactory bulb. And it has some functions, but one of the functions that it does is to actually split the oxygen and the prana. So the oxygen then goes down into our lungs, which we then breathe, and then that moves around our body to feed our muscles, to feed our organs, etc. But the prana, the energy, the ki, the chi, goes into our mind. So when we are surrounded by prana-rich oxygen molecules, the energy goes into our mind and it makes us feel alive because this is life force. It makes us feel revitalized. It makes us feel alert. It helps us to alleviate fatigue and headaches and migraines and stuffiness. So when you're feeling tired, when you're feeling slump, when you're feeling like the answers aren't coming, when you're feeling like you've got nothing left, you need to breathe. But not only do you need to breathe, but you need to breathe outside, where there is prana-rich oxygen. The things that take the prana before you can: air conditioning, vehicles, buildings, all of those sorts of things, all of those man-made things, they too will take prana. And if you're living in an urban environment, they've taken it all and there's no prana left for you, so you feel slump. You feel moody, you feel heavy, yeah? Go for a walk in a park for 10 minutes, you feel alive.
Is this the same as the negative ions you get from a waterfall?
Negative ions you get from a waterfall? I'm not sure. I don't know is the answer to that.
Oh, okay. Well, because our understanding is that the energy that comes off a waterfall or that you get very first thing in the morning is more of a negative ion and therefore it gives us more energy.
Okay, so what I can say about the energy that you get first thing in the morning, and this is why mornings are so important to me. I was going to say as a yogi, but I'm not a yogi. I certainly wouldn't class myself as a yogi, but I've studied yoga very extensively. So the reason why mornings are important to me is because of the sunrise. And you've seen or you've heard of yogis and sages and monks and everybody always meditating in the mornings, right? You see people across the world, particularly Asian countries, they get up at the crack of dawn, right? That's not been taken away from them. Birds and animals wake up at sunrise, right? Well, why is this? This is because as the sun rises, it gives off a particular level of electromagnetism, especially charged electromagnetism that is full of information-rich electric, chi, ki, prana, right? It's charged. And this happens an hour before sunrise to an hour after sunrise or thereabouts. I'm sure they've not, timed it. And so when you are with the sunrise, and it's actually called Usha Shakti in the yogic world, when you are with the sunrise and you're breathing in through the nose, you literally breathe in this prana, this electromagnetism called Usha Shakti, and it's information rich, it's inspiration rich, it's creativity rich. because it's this electromagnetism that literally holds creativity. So we breathe it in. So all of my ideas, all of my thinking comes at sunrise. And I'm there with pen and paper like this, because that's what it's there for. So that's why people feel more alive. That's why people feel all the ideas come at sunrise. That's why people are more creative. And that's why people will meditate at sunrise. Not only that, but just before sunrise, the energies are calm.
Yeah, there's something magic about 5 a.m. in the morning, and the viewers will know that I belong to the 5 a.m. club, and there's something magic about that time of the day. And so I think you've just explained part of that, of why.
Yeah, it's Usha Shakti. And I get up at 4:30 a.m. I get up at 4:30 so that I can shower, so that I can be in my hammock by 5, right? Because those hours of 5 till 7 are so precious. So precious, because the world is still.
It is.
And therefore, this is still.
If you don't pick up your phone first.
Do not turn it on. Get yourself a battery-operated alarm clock. And so you don't have to turn your phone on. This is so critical. You're very, very right. And those hours, this is my personal experience, right? Those hours between 5 and 7 are so precious because they are so still. They're still in the world. They're still in the atmosphere, and they're still in my mind. And I literally feel as the world wakes up. I can feel it, I can see it, I can hear it, I can smell it.
Wow. Yeah, this is amazing. So are we up to the next question? Because I'm like, there's so much in this.
Let me summarize for you. Right. So I just talked about prana. So what I said was, right, in nature is also, we smell nature. Yeah, we hear nature, we see nature, and they all have their scientific reasons as to how and why they calm us down. They create the environment for health. They create the environment for improved cognitive functions. So with this knowledge, hopefully people will see the importance of capitalizing with nature, of getting out in nature, of utilizing nature as much as possible, because we are hardwired to perform better when we are in nature.
Okay, you mentioned the senses, so obviously taste probably doesn't come in as much. But what about the feeling? What about through our skin? But hugging a tree, walking barefoot.
Well, that's all about energy.
Yeah.
When you hug a tree, yeah, I do that. And yeah, I walk barefoot. Oh my God, maybe I am a yogi.
Hugging yogi piece, we're all good.
Yeah, no. I don't look like one though, right?
No,
I don't sound like one either.
I don't know what one looks like, so we're not stereotyping here.
I live in Copenhagen. Yeah, so it's all about energy exchange. That's what's happening. Energy exchange. So the earth gives off its own energy, the Schumann resonance. And this energy also brings us life force. It helps to, and the study's done again, they actually put people in underground bunkers and they cut them off, because in these underground bunkers, they were surrounded by literally solid metal cages. So no energetic resonance could come in. And these people that spent a certain amount of time, I forget how long, maybe it was a week or something, they actually started to get dizzy. They started to get sick. They started to go crazy. They started to literally vomit because they weren't receiving the natural resonance from the earth.
Wow. Yeah.
So we regulate our energetic system through that which we receive from the earth, and that which we receive from the sun, and that which we receive from the universe. So when you're walking barefoot, what you're doing is you're removing the plastic, you're removing the rubber that actually disconnects you from that Schumann resonance. So you're connected directly to this energy. And not only do you receive good energy from the earth, but you actually are able to give away your negative energy to the earth. So there's an exchange happening. And the same happens when you hug trees. The trees will absorb all of your negative energy and they give you their positive energy. So there's literally a cycle happening. You don't have to hug it. You just have to be sitting near it or standing near it and set the intention, see this exchange happening, and it happens. Because everything is energy.
This might be new for many, many people to understand, and look up the Schumann resonance. You can see the graphs and the science of this energy of the earth and how it changes. It is absolutely fascinating when you start going and having a look at this stuff.
Yeah, and the resonance, the Schumann resonance, is actually shifting at the moment, so it's to a not good place. So it's actually really important that we create the opportunity for connection even more now. Because it's not as powerful and it's not as potent as it should.
So absolutely. So this is why, you know, this in this world right now, choosing love, connection, joy is so important for us personally, but also for the entire planet. So Carrie, let's talk about how teachers can capitalize on all of this. So what can teachers do in their classrooms? What can they do for themselves to be able to capitalize on all these great things you've been talking about?
So first of all, before we go jumping into the classroom, I want to jump into the self.
Okay.
Because the more you impact yourself, the more you will impact other people. So yeah, we could think about, okay, well, how can we bring nature into the classroom? And how can we get the classroom out into nature? But first of all, think about you. What are you doing? How often are you going into nature? How often are you connecting with nature? How often are you feeling nature? Because we don't go into nature because of the science. No, we don't. We go into nature because of the way that it makes us feel.
Yeah.
You know, when you've been for a quick walk around the park, or you've been for a jog outside, and that's another thing. Make sure you exercise outside as much as possible too, because that's going to be so important. But you know how you feel after, you know, a hike up a mountain, if you've got access to it. You just feel different, right?
Yes.
So it's important that you focus on yourself, first of all, and that you're receiving these benefits. And then once you're receiving these benefits, when you feel the difference, then you're more inclined to want to incorporate it into other things. So we need to think about the senses. So how can you expose yourself, your classroom, your students to seeing nature, hearing nature, smelling nature, touching nature, tasting nature? How can you do that? And you need to prime yourself for happiness, prime yourself for creativity, prime yourself for memory improvement, prime yourself for problem solving. And we do that by making time for nature. Studies have shown that 5 hours a month is enough to have an impact on our physiology, on our immune systems, on our blood pressures, on all of the stuff that's going on inside of us, as well as what's going on in our minds. And they've actually created a pyramid. So it'll be the daily bursts of happiness and daily bursts of nature that you'll want to expose yourself to. So like going to the bird fountain or the water fountain, going for a walk around the park, picking the scenic route rather than the motorway. Then there are the weekly actions that you want to take. And the weekly actions are going for that hour-long walk, or deciding to do an exercise class outside, or creating purposeful outside meetings. And then there are the monthly, where you extend this to like 2, 3, 4, 5 hours, or a whole day if you can. Do an outdoor retreat, go for a picnic. And then there's the annual activities where you literally cut yourself off from technology and you take yourself into the wilderness or into the bush, and you spend 1, 2, 3, 4 days there. But 5 hours a month is enough, but we absolutely need to make time for it. And how can you bring the outdoors indoors? I mean, you've got a perfect example behind you right now. We bring plants indoors. We have pictures and photographs of natural scenes indoors. We bring the bird sound in. We put the earphones on if we need to. How can you bring the outside in? Create those walk and talk meetings. Don't just sit behind the computer and the desk all the time. If you're working on the, what's it, the Pomodoro, you know, where you work for 20 minutes and have a break. Thank you. That one. How can you bring nature into that? You know, like, do you listen to birdsong for a minute, or do you actually go outside and breathe deep, breathe in some prana? Exercise outdoors, because when you exercise indoors, what you do is you shut off your natural supply of oxygen and prana, and you don't get to see all these natural things. So where you can, exercise outside. So you're breathing energy in. So you're flushing out your mind, you're flushing out your body with fresh oxygen and prana. That includes yoga. That includes any type of exercise. And again, studies have shown that when you exercise outside, you actually gain more benefit and you're more likely to stick at doing exercise than you are as if you're exercising inside. And turn off the technology.
Yay.
When you go outside, turn off the technology. Take out the earphones, turn the phone off so that you can hear nature, so that you're with yourself rather than with a distraction. And no distractions are coming in, so that you can actually hear, see, smell, taste, touch the nature. One of the investigations, they had 3 groups of people. One group was sent outside with their phones. Another group was sent outside. I think I walked for like 2 hours or something. Sent out with no phones, no technology, nothing, just them. And then there was the control group. And those people that did not have any technology, when they came back, they did a test and they were 50% more creative than the people who had the control group and the people who had the technology with them. And they were allowed to make a phone call along the way because they truly connected to the nature in every single way.
Yeah.
To turn the technology off.
Yay. So obviously, and you've mentioned this, when you look after yourself, this creates those ripple effects out to your pupils and the parents and the people you work with. So really important.
Yeah, and that's because of what we call mirror neurons. And everyone's heard of the power of 3 degrees, right? You do something and it impacts up to 1,000 people beyond you. And the reason why that happens is because in our brains, we have what we call mirror neurons. So like when you yawn, Karen, I see that you're yawning, so I yawn, right? So my mirror neurons are picking up what you're doing, and the mirror neurons sit next to the motor neurons. And so when I see that you're yawning, because I'm sat next to the motor neurons make me yawn. It's the same with happiness. Yeah.
I didn't yawn, by the way.
No, you didn't. You didn't yawn. But it's the same with smiling. If you smile, I see you're smiling, so it makes me smile, right? Yeah. If you're happy because of the impact that nature is having on you, then you're going to impact the happiness levels and everything on, and you're going to act as role models. And the more we encourage children to get outside, the more they're going to engage not only their minds, but their bodies, their muscles, everything. They're going to have so much a bigger sense of exploration and adventure. And this ripples out into their lives, and this will then ripple out to the parents as well.
Of course. Carrie, you said at the start, how long have we got? And we are coming to the end of our time, but I think we could talk forever. But tell us, let's start finishing up by talking about some ways that we can collaborate with nature.
You know, when I read your questions that you were going to ask, and I read this question, I thought, oh my God, what an incredible question. How can we collaborate with nature? And I said before, we don't go out into nature because of the science. We go out into nature because of the way it makes us feel. And when you spend time in nature, when you genuinely connect with no technology, you do actually gain a sense of awe. And it helps you to understand and feel and believe that there's something grander than you. You see your size in comparison to everything else. And studies have shown that those people who do go outside, they actually stop wallowing. They don't worry about things that are happening. They stop ruminating over things because they see themselves in the grand scheme and the grand picture. So it helps us to understand our place. And when we feel the impact of nature, when we allow ourselves to connect to that and therefore connect to ourselves and understand who we are, then we're more likely to want to look after nature. Because we understand its critical element or critical role that it has in our lives. People learn to heal naturally when they are in nature. People understand their greatness, their vastness, their potential when they are in nature. And when you understand that, you want to give back. So we want to protect it. So how can we best collaborate with nature? Just get out there and let it do its magic.
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful, Carrie. Thank you so much for that enlightenment, really. There's been a lot of aha moments going off in my head, and I hope true for the teachers watching too. So finally, we always ask this question because at Spectrum, we're all about lifelong learning. And what are you reading? What are you watching? What are you listening to right now that's totally inspiring you?
Yeah, one of the books that I come back to time and time again is called The Happiness Advantage by Sean Aker. And it's a business orientated book. So it's talking about competitive advantage. But what he is doing is showing you how positive psychology, how improving your happiness levels impacts your physiology and impacts your cognitive functions so that you can maximize your potential, so that you can maximize your productivity. And I don't mean so that you can produce more for the people that you work for. What I mean is you can produce your amount of productivity for whatever dreams you want to create in your life. That's the way I read it. And he talks about, or he summarizes some of the main principles of positive psychology and how being happiness is the precursor to success and not the other way around. And to me, this is just a massive life lesson. And I reread and reread and reread that book.
I haven't read the book, but I've watched his TED Talk. So I'm going to put the book on my list as well, because I've heard so many people talk about the book. So thank you so much. Carrie, I feel like all buzzy after talking to you. It's been an absolute pleasure. I wish you all the best for 2022 as you head back to your beautiful island and your hammock and the coconut juice. What do you call
it? The fractals.
And your fractals.
Coconut water.
Coconut water. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you so much.
It's been a huge pleasure. Thank you for having me.